I think what retail and commerce are missing though is just how much more data is necessary to answer the kind of questions that AI is asking, or customers will ask via AI, right? So we've moved from this really keyword-driven search. The conversation's so much more nuanced.
AI. This episode's all about AI. So if you have AI fatigue, I would not listen. All jokes aside, Rob Smith started building websites in the demandware space before it got acquired by Salesforce, and talks a bit about his entrepreneurial journey building agency that eventually ended up selling off to now what is OSF Digital. So yeah, really interesting episode on AI, talking about the tactical enterprise use cases. So such a great episode. Joining us today, we have Rob Smith from OSF Digital. Welcome, Rob.
Oh,
awesome. Well, Rob, why don't you start off with a brief intro about maybe your career journey and how you got to OSF and how you're heading up commerce as the SVP of Commerce. So yeah, walk us through that.
I was a web developer, right? I was when the original wave of web development appeared, where we had just basic HTML and all that kind of thing. That got me pretty excited. I really liked what you could build with it. And so I went pretty deep into that. And I have the same feeling, by the way, now with AI, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Everything else in between has just been a bit incremental. But so after that, I started an agency, digital agency with a partner, Adrian. And he and I built this, well, he'd already got a design agency, but then we built together a digital agency that did everything from kind of Drupal to CMS to Sitecore to e-commerce stuff as well. And then we realized that we're only small, we're only about 20, 25 people. We had to focus. So we focused on e-commerce. And then within there, we picked one platform that we were going to focus on completely. And that ended up being Demandware, as it was called. And of course, Demandware sold to Salesforce and became Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And I kind of continued to ride that wave with my own business. And then OSF bought my business about 6 years ago. And so three years of kind of earnout, if you want to call it that. And then 3 years of just enjoying myself. So I've ended up in this position. So it's been fun.
What a journey. And how long did you have your agency for before the acquisition, out of curiosity?
It's about 12 years. So 12 years to get to 30 people. A lot of people will be like, oh, that took a long time. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, it did. But that was also all of my formative kind of career years from about 21 straight out of university or college or whatever you want to call it. And having to learn everything, right? So learning everything from hiring to accounting to finance to loans to all sorts of stuff, apart from actually just delivering the work as well. So it was a fun time. If I knew then what I knew now, I'm sure things would have been different, but it was still a fun ride. Yeah.
No, that's really cool. And I mean, it sounds like you saw a couple different kind of evolutions of digital commerce. So maybe I'd love to hear, Rob, your opinion. Like, what were the technology cycles from early commerce to, like, I guess what we're calling platform commerce to AI-driven commerce? Maybe talk us through that. Like, what is that in your opinion, and where are we on that journey today?
We've gone through a few cycles, right? We had the early days of the web where e-commerce was just super simple, like very, very basic kind of buy pages and maybe a basket. But even promotions were difficult at that stage, right? We progressed through that quite quickly, and then we had some decent websites. And I think the next real stage after that was mobile commerce, right? Everything went mobile. Everyone made an app, even though they didn't need an app. Everyone stopped using apps, apart from the people that had high repeat purchase. But everyone still needed to be mobile optimized. And that is, everyone sees that as non-negotiable now, right? 80% of traffic is mobile these days to most of our kind of customers, or somewhere around there. And then the wave of social commerce came. Right. So everything moved over to Facebook and kind of Instagram and TikTok, and people started shopping, browsing, discovering on those platforms. And then still most of the time checking out on a normal website, right? Although there are TikTok shops and they're important and they drive a lot of demand. But now, as we've seen recently, especially the past few weeks with Google's announcement, NRF, agentic shopping has suddenly become both technically feasible and quite straightforward, actually, to implement in technology, but also something that retailers and brands are really starting to pay attention to, I think. But it's a double-edged thing, right? Every retailer I speak to is kind of like, yes, I see it. I'm excited about it. I'm nervous about it. And also the traffic from those tools at the moment is still a very small percentage of what is driving my revenue, right? And so I can't make strong business cases yet about I need to do this and I need to do it now, because there are stronger business cases ahead of it in terms of change I need to make, whether it's social or on-site or whatever. So even though we're here, the future is not everywhere yet. And some customers are definitely more in than out. And some are just waiting to see what happens a bit, because they're just kind of like, it's not going to go away in the next 2 months. I'm not going to lose in the next 2 months. And I think there might be some truth to that.
Can you explain in simplest terms what the Google announcement was and what it means if I'm a retailer? Like what is that announcement?
Yeah, so the announcement from Google was that they brought out something called UCP, Universal Commerce Protocol. Now, OpenAI had also brought out their own protocol called ACP, I think, Agentic Commerce Protocol, right? And both of these are ways in which their AI tooling can connect to your website and create an order effectively. So both in OpenAI's case, it provides a catalog, which I'm sure we'll talk through a bit more later. And it also gives the ability to transact using your payment provider. So you are still the merchant of record and you still send the goods out and do all that kind of thing. Google's was a little bit more open in its approach. It had a few more launch partners. It had more payment providers. And the thing on my mind with Google is that they're in such a different position to OpenAI. They've already got all the Google search kind of monopoly, right? They've already got Google Shopping, and AdWords. So they've got this huge head start on business tooling and relationships with businesses. They also make all their own AI chips, whereas OpenAI use NVIDIA and Microsoft kind of as a hyperscaler. And they've got an absolute ton of cash in the bank. So I think they're really well positioned to take the fight forward. And why it was so significant as a final thing is that the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, went to NRF in New York to make that announcement with Walmart at a retail show, right? This is kind of unheard of, that a big tech CEO appears at like a retail show, right? It's just not normal. And I thought that was a big statement of intent from Google.
It makes sense. And to your point, they already have a lot of the ad networks and a lot of that stuff kind of figured out. It's very famous. One of my favorite books talks about how basically Google was struggling to monetize a long time ago AdWords. And it took them so many iterations. And it was finally a junior engineer that figured it out. It's kind of a cool story. And to your point, like figuring that monetization out, and there's just going to be so much intrinsic knowledge around ads and like they've clearly nailed it to get the ad spend going and Meta as well. So that would obviously be a brand new muscle for like OpenAI that has historically said, hey, we're not going to do ads. Now, hey, maybe we have to, or maybe we're going to take 4 or 5% of your transactions. So I think there's a lot going on there. It's very interesting. To your point, like the dust hasn't settled yet.
Oh, not at all. We've got some time on that one. And I think what's interesting is that they both kind of race to make a protocol, a kind of open protocol that everyone will use. And in the end, we'll probably end up with the two of them. I don't see that they'll merge together necessarily. But I do get feedback on, for instance, OpenAI's catalog spec that you need to meet to kind of get things listed or get things easily seen or whatever you want to call it inside ChatGPT is really quite large and not easy to necessarily match all the kind of data together. Whereas people have been running the Google spec catalog for ages. It's something that should be easier to adopt.
Very cool. You've mentioned before that technology ambition often outpaces like either the readiness or the value. Maybe talk to me a bit about, as you're chatting with different leaders, like what are some of the biggest executive disconnects on AI expectations when it comes to retail?
I think it does. I think you're right. Quite often it does outpace it. Certainly we're hearing a lot from kind of C-suites and kind of that director level of e-commerce or whatever you want to call it, omnichannel, that they've got an AI remit, right? We must use AI. We need to move on AI. Everyone's talking to me about it. I see the potential. It's where the market's going. And they're not wrong about any of those things, right? The issue is that when that hits the detail of their organization, they have that operational readiness problem, right? And I think a big part of that is data, fundamentally. And I'm definitely not the first person to say it, that's for sure. But I think AI, the big thing about AI when it's now applied to organizations is that it exposes all of their weaknesses that have always been there, but they've been hidden. And they've been hidden by humans in one way or another. They've been hidden by humans. Either the customer is getting a bad experience, the store colleague is having a hard time to do simple tasks, the marketeers can't really personalize email that well. All of these are humans suffering at the hands of various things, and data being a really big one of them. But then when you try and make that fast with AI, or you try and feed AI, you're just lacking all of that kind of data, which breaks down into really a couple of different things that I think we'll talk about later on the catalog. But that's the main thing. Yeah. It exposes the weaknesses in the company.
If you're listening to the e-commerce toolbox, you're entitled to a podcast exclusive website audit. Go to noibu.com/podcast-audit for a free scan that uncovers the hidden friction blocking your conversions and shows you where you're leaking revenue.
Makes sense. And obviously, you've seen a lot of merchants that are maybe underperforming commercially or operationally. And sometimes it's really easy to kind of blame like a platform or think that, hey, the grass is greener somewhere else. In your opinion, how much of challenges are generally more implementation versus technology related, or is it really situational dependence? I'm sure obviously a lot of these cases.
I think sometimes there's a bit of both. It depends who implements your platform. But I think we're getting to the point now where commerce platforms particularly, quite a lot of it is becoming what I will call commoditized. The idea of a decent checkout and promotion engine and all of these kind of things, I don't think we're lacking for that anymore. I think once you hit scale and you've got multi-countries and languages and all this kind of stuff, that presents some more internal issues for customers to get that right. But again, there's still a solution for that. So the only things that then come down to performance are kind of site speed is a massive one. But every platform I know can be tuned to be good and fast, right? They're not all good and fast. And that's a different thing. It depends on whether you're paying attention or not to that particular factor. But a lot of the time now, I see it coming down to actually a lot of quite simple stuff. So have you actually tuned your user experience? Have you really looked into how your customers shop and what they want? Because we've become really boring in e-commerce, I think. I don't know whether you agree with me on this. Every website looks the same, right? Give or take. The homepage has got this, it's got this slot, it's got the other slot, it's got some bestsellers, it's got some whatever. The category page is here. There's variations on a theme, but they got really boring, right? Whereas we used to have quite a lot of variety in websites, and we seem to have honed it down because of performance to remove friction and make the checkout easy. But we forgot that customers actually need to find things out, right? So there's still plenty of e-commerce sites I visit where my questions are just not being answered, right, about the particular product. And it's normally about context. Can I use it here, or should I use it there, or is it warm enough for that, or whatever it is, right? And they've honed it so much thinking about add to bag buttons being sticky and all that kind of thing that I think we've missed the point. And then there are quite a few e-commerce sites, I think, or brands or businesses as a whole, who don't know who they are exactly or who they serve. And so their product set might be a bit crazy, or they've got too many product sets, or they find it hard to merchandise them, or whatever, right? And so what we're spending a lot of time at the moment with customers is, yes, we'll make the site speed fast. Yes, we'll do some fantastic kind of conversion rate stuff on the UX side, but we're having more conversations about, well, who are you? What's your product set? How do you really want to go to market? What's the balance of content on your website versus commerce and checkout? How do you build fantastic experiences for customers? And that's a much better performance conversation than, oh, I don't think the platform's doing it right. Because the thing is, when you re-platform, you take your business with you to the new platform. And unsurprisingly, sometimes it underperforms there as well, because it wasn't really the technology in the first.
Yeah, we've seen some of those as well. I think it's an easy thing to cling on to because it takes 2 years. So you kind of buy yourself a lot of time as an executive on the retail side.
Yeah. With the commoditization of commerce platforms, though, I mean, we don't we don't tend to find it takes that long anymore to get these things done. And also with kind of AI helping us with coding more and more, right? The big costs of replatforming always used to be integrations to order management and whatnot, and the storefront build, right, of building up that kind of experience. AI coding can obviously help with both sides of that, but the storefront, especially if you can get designs, get them all done in Figma or whatever it is, and then use AI to do a lot of heavy lifting, and then obviously a really detailed check and everything, we can go quite fast.
Very cool. Love to hear that. So talk to me a bit about the data structure. So let's say that I'm a retail business. I'm trying to really grow my agentic visibility, right? Everyone's trying to build an AI SEO tool right now. And then from there, I'm trying to drive my traffic. I'm going to implement some of these protocols. What is the top data gap that you typically see? Because in my experience, everyone thinks they have a data problem, and everyone kind of does, right? I think it's a non-solved problem. Like it's kind of like an infinite problem in every org I chat with, and even in our own business, we're like, I wish our Salesforce data and our Gong data match together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So talk to me a bit about like, what do they absolutely need to nail so that they're not putting out a really poor experience?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And we do have customers that actually have gone a really long way to sorting out their data, and still I don't know, I've had meetings about clienteling with one of our jewelry customers recently, and they were like, I just wish we had this piece of data over here. And they've done an already really good job. So I think you're right that there is a bit of a infinite problem there. I think what retail and commerce are missing, though, is just how much more data is necessary to answer the kind of questions that AI is asking, or customers will ask via AI. Right. So we moved from this really keyword driven search. Yeah. So winter snow jacket, or I don't know, something like this, right? That lands you on a page of jackets, right? Some of which are wintry, and they work their way through and have a look. And whereas now the conversation's so much more nuanced. It's more, I'm looking for a jacket for winter. My color preferences are kind of black or gray, or kind of maybe a navy blue. I like these kind of brands. I'm going to be going skiing at this place. I don't even need to say the temperature. This place at this time of year. I really want to make sure I'm really warm. What do you recommend? I mean, it's a huge query, and we all know that this intent-based searching is the way things are going to go. That keyword search will become an intent-based search. And even in my Chrome app on my phone, the past few days, I've noticed that the search box, when you tap into the search box, it's a double line search box now. It always used to be a single line search box, but all of these little changes are happening quite quickly. And in terms of the content that you require, you need a lot more content, but you also need a lot more context. So for instance, if I'm talking about the jacket example again, when I go to all the top websites on those jackets, they talk about some of the content, but it's brief. And it's brief because they don't want a big, long product detail page, because they're always told for conversion, we don't need a big, long product detail page. We don't need a huge and long and rich description, because no one reads them. So let's not bother making them. The problem now is that AI does read them, and it does use them, and it does use them to compare to other places, right? So this idea that we've missed of rich content is now coming back in force. And there are other elements that really bug me. Like, a lot of people use their own proprietary names for their technology, like in the jacket thing, like a wind force jacket or something like that. And you're meant to know what that means, but they don't explain it, and AI won't know what that means. And so you've got all these little gaps that you didn't realize you had before. And that's just on content. Context is all that stuff around where and how can I use it? And a lot of that would be driven by customer Q&A. And this is one of the reasons why Reddit is such a popular source for AI. It's a giant customer Q&A source of information, right? Is that restaurant really good if I'm looking to go on a business dinner that's actually a bit more formal and we don't want to be eating with our hands or whatever? I mean, it's really rich kind of information. So retailers have got to get a sprinter to get their product content up to scratch with both context and content.
Honestly, I hadn't thought about it from that lens, but that makes a lot of sense. like what the AI is going to use for content, like context and for information, is stuff that potentially was not good for increasing conversion rate on PEP. So people just stop generating the content at some
Yeah.
point. So that's
Yeah. I,
really interesting.
I reckon that most retailers have got a third of what they need to supply to AI to make it decent. If you're a retailer or brand that's blessed with a lot of product reviews, there's an incredible amount of detail in there that if you fed that to the AI, or you got an AI to summarize what's in your reviews to give to the AI agents, that's an incredible source, because lots of people in there will go, I did quite like this, but actually the zipper is a bit thin if you've got kind of hand problems, or I don't know what I mean. It's that kind of real detail that will be fed to the AI as a question, and it will find that in that review information. Or if you've got a Q&A section, some retailers do that, but you've got to have scale for that. If you're doing 5, 10, 20 million online a year, you probably don't have enough scale to have a really rich Q&A section, because it just doesn't get filled in. So there's lots of ifs, buts, maybes, but you can also use AI to help you generate this kind of stuff as well. I think you asked that earlier, right?
As we look to wrap up, out of curiosity, do you think that the AI, call it experience that you're just describing, will be more pervasive through 2 to 3 different new age search engines, or is it going to be like site specific? So for example, would I go to guests and then start interacting the way that you're just describing, or do you actually think it starts at like the Google or the OpenAI layer?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And the answer, if I was a brand or a retailer, is that you need to have both. And it depends on what kind of business you're in. So for instance, if I'm in like a high frequency grocery business, where actually, just like for me, when I home order to here, it's completely app based, right? I don't look at any ChatGPT website or whatever. The only thing I might use it for is like recipes, and then I go and order that stuff through the grocery app, right? So there's lots of things that they could do inside their own experience to use AI to drive it. Whereas if I was in a commodity business, like, I don't know, batteries or household supplies of any kind, that is going to be heavily disrupted by these search tools, because it's just going to be too convenient to just order it through voice, through your phone when you're on the move. And that's why I come all the way back to what I said at the start, which is customers really need to know kind of who they are and why they're here and what they're here to sell, and therefore what experience they need to give to the customer. One of the big jewelry brands that we work with is David Yurman in the States. And they're very, very clear that the customer experience is everything. And actually they do want to have a very personalized experience with the customer. So both in store and online, to the point where every customer will eventually have a kind of a brand ambassador who work in the stores, who will have like a book of business, and they'll be interacting with them that way. So they'll need a lot of their own AI tooling, but how will they be discovered? There might still be a lot of discovery for our brand through those chat interfaces. So they need to be in both places. I don't think you can escape that.
So probably each brand will probably have like an 80-20 principle. For example, with like a David Yurman, it's probably 80% not discovery. I mean, it's like people that already know the brand that are on the website, and then 20% discovery. And then something more commoditized like batteries would be more of like 80% of the focus is going to be on just making sure that you're the top ranked, because it's going to be heavily discovery driven, if that makes sense.
And I do worry about that sector, that last sector that you spoke about, because I think the big brands only have a bigger advantage even more now. Like it's very interesting to me, for instance, we haven't talked about Amazon, but it's very interesting that Amazon is just not playing in the sandbox, right? It's not playing with Google, it's not playing with OpenAI, it's building its own Rufus AI and doing all of its own thing, because it is threatened by this, right? To a certain extent. The idea that someone wouldn't just open Amazon for those kind of things, which is a lot of what I do, is probably mildly terrifying. That's a really interesting thing to see play out. But you're right about that slider. The only thing you didn't mention that I'd also mention, but we shouldn't get into it now just for time, is the use of AI to really change people's internal workflow. Too often I'm seeing brands that are not thinking about, if I made this process AI first, what would it look like? How could we fundamentally change the work that we do here so that I'm not spending hours building the trading report for a Monday? because that still happens plenty of times in retail, but it's not necessary because AI can build that rapport for you.
I think it's much harder to do when you have established processes. My brother right now is building a D2C business, and he's been growing 300% a year.
Yeah.
And like now he's actually hitting some pretty early scale, and he's defaulting to like trying to solve it with AI before looking for a human.
Yes.
And I think when you have like 7 people working on something, it's hard to be like, yeah, be AI first, because it kind of implies that like maybe those jobs wouldn't be there. Do you know what I mean? If you
absolutely.
if you were there before. So that's why I think there's such an adoption gap, in my opinion.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's why the personal productivity side of AI is flying so fast, right? That's the bit that's really cranking and iterating, Claude co-work and all these kind of different things, because it's contained. As soon as you try and spread it across enterprise, it's quite difficult. But there's another angle, just to finish off on the enterprise side of things, that I found when I was doing a lot of Agentforce work last year, was that there are lots of what I call human band-aids inside organizations. So they'll have a written process, but then when I talk to the contact center and go, is that the way you do it? They go, no, that's not the way we do it. But that's the written process. Yeah, we don't do it that way. Okay, how do you decide this then? Oh, we decide it based on maybe this and maybe that, but there's no written business rule. No, we just onboard people and train them, and they figure it out as well, and they do it the same way, so it's kind of consistent. And like, well, we can't AI that process because you've got a human head with nothing written down in the middle. So unless you codify that process properly, that can't be AI driven. And actually, world over, companies have got so many human band-aids inside them. It's surprising.
That's a really interesting way of framing it, but I know exactly what you mean. Like some things, they just require too much dynamic thinking to like outsource it to AI, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one of the two. But the one I was explaining there was just a simple, do you give a discount or not? It was a service recovery process.
Oh.
Do you give a discount or not? And they're like, well, we look at this, we look at that. And I was like, can you write that down as a process? And they're like, yeah, I suppose we could. And you know what I mean? So it's not, that one wasn't rocket science, but it was there.
That's cool. Well, Rob, this was a great chat. Really, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, fantastic. I enjoyed it.
The e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.